Hello, Comp 1. It is February 4th. I had meant to get this video out to you yesterday, and I had a wayfaring stranger show up at my door. A house guest, otherwise known of as my younger son, Will. He surprised my wife and I by wanting to spend the weekend with us. Let's start off by showing you my personal turkeys. I took this photograph Thursday. They were all over the farm. There must have been a couple hundred of them. This is just a few of them up on my little hill looking out at our tiny lake. Deep but clean, 70 feet deep, full of fish. And such beautiful birds. Why am I talking about turkeys? I had the idea that I would talk about style today, start up the style unit. And then when I got up to Staples, they had so many concerns about the first essay that I just sort of had to change things out a little bit. So here's what I have for you today. We'll be talking about style next week. First thing is, quick little assignment before I even preview. Take a blank sheet of paper and draw the alphabet vertically, please, A to Z. And then take a few minutes, get yourself a cup of tea, and if you drink tea, and do one of two things. Write out either the first thing that comes to your mind for each thing, like apple, or as you move through the list, write out a word that is the most important thing that you can think of that begins with that letter. Don't lose this list either. Put it on your refrigerator with magnets, because you're going to need it next week. And if a family member says, "What is this list?" Say something like, "You know what, that's for me to know and for you to find out." And next week you can tell them, because by then you'll know. So do that little side assignment. And we'll start in on style next week, which is one of my favorite things to think about in an English class. I really get excited when I have an opportunity to talk about it. I never get tired of it. I basically want to do a few things today. I want to show you a map and do a little talking about it because I haven't really breached the subject of the war that's bursting into bloom on the other side of the world. And I want to talk about it in relation to poetry, believe it or not. But before I do that, I want you to know I've got my priorities straight. The main thing we should think about when we consider the war in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine and all the similar nearby countries that are being affected, we have to think about our brothers and sisters that are suffering over there. The math can obfuscate the suffering that's happened. When you hear like, 200,000 people dead, 2 million people, 2.5 million people displaced as immigrants, refugees, not to count the hundreds of thousands of soldiers and people who have been wounded, civilians as well as military. The math ruins it, and you just kind of gloss over and you go like, oh, okay, a lot of people. You know this. I know you know this in your human hearts, same as mine. Each individual number is a life, a human life. So I just want you to know that, and I especially think of children because I love them so much. And yet I want to talk about literature in that region briefly. It won't take long. I want to make a couple comments on essays, say some things that I said to some kids up in Staples yesterday, my little class up there. And we're going to have poetry loaded into the end of this video. The great Charlie Parr is how that'll be my outro today. And I'll tell you a few things about him. I sometimes bring musicians for my Verse Like Water reading series. And before I dive into it, I just want to say, I want to make sure that every one of you knows that these pens are available to you. But there's a condition. You have to find me at CLC like Jessie did. Now, truth be told, Jessie wasn't looking for me. She just kind of collided with me in the hallway. And she's like, "Johnson." And I'm like, "Hey, who are you?" She says, "I'm in your online class." Well, we had to run into my beautiful classroom, and I gave her a Uniball Micropoint. You find me, I'll give you one of these. I just might give you two because they're small. So, let me talk about reading for a minute. This is a writing class, and I've already explained to you the setup. The first half of this course, roughly, is going to be an invitation for you, an opportunity for you to think about yourself as a writer and the decisions that you make when you engage in the human activity of writing. The second half of the semester, I'm going to get you thinking about yourself as a reader. Good news is you already can read and write. You've proven it. So there's nothing to be nervous about. But I'm not getting ahead of myself, I don't think, today. as I talk about reading. And maybe as I talk in this way, you'll think about reading phases that you've had. Okay? Oh yeah, here's this thing I wanted to look at. Got the computer dim so the glare is less. I've been through reading phases in my life because I'm a reader, right? If you weren't a reader, you probably wouldn't have reading phases. You know, I won't go over all of them, but I can remember my Dr. Seuss phase. I can remember being a little boy at St. Stephen's School in Anoka in about 4th grade. I got obsessed with biographies and autobiographies. I couldn't stop reading them. The Sandy Koufax story, the Abraham Lincoln story, the story of George Washington. And then there came a day where I just, you know what, I'm kind of sick of these. I want something different. And I remember a day where it was just pouring rain, and everybody wanted to be in the classroom playing Duck, Duck, Gray Duck, and I asked Mrs. Larson if I could go to the school library upstairs. 4th grade was in the basement. And I went into that library, which was looked after by Sister Armella, and I went over to the 2 shelves where the biographies were, and I pulled down, you know, maybe the 8 to 10 that I hadn't read yet, stacked them on the side, spines facing me, and I started reading them, but not reading them. I real quickly grabbed each biography, autobiography, whatever, biographies generally, and I skipped to the back and just read the end. And Sister was studying me, and she wondered what I was up to, and she came over and she said, I'll never forget this. She said, Jeff, what are you doing? Why aren't you reading the whole book? I looked up and I cheerfully told her, you know, I just want to read about the part where the hero dies. Well, that bought me my first opportunity to talk to a psychiatrist. And they brought one in from the district. I can't hardly see the woman's face anymore. It's so long in the past. But I remember definitely being asked questions about death. Are you scared of death, Jeffy? Do you worry about death a lot? Are you frightened of it? And I just kept saying, no, I'm not afraid of death. I just like reading about it. And after a while, she cut me loose and let me go. I remember further on up the line, too, I decided that I didn't need Ernest Hemingway anymore, and then I had to realize, what is the matter with me? What is the matter with you? And that was about the time I started teaching him, when I was around 28, 29 years old, and I've been teaching him ever since. You'll see. But what particularly I find interesting and striking, there's nothing prophetic about this, but keeping in mind all the suffering that's going on, take a look at this map. A number of years ago, for some reason, I traded my preoccupation with Latin American writers for writers in the East, in Eastern Europe. And not only is this a reading habit of mine, but it's about the activity of hosting poets. You know, take a look at the, at the top or the bottom of the map. We can start there. I'm bringing a Romanian American poet, Maya Popa, in 24 days. And if we go around it like a clock, roughly, I brought a Serbian poet, Charlie Simic, U.S. Poet Laureate, who just died this year. That was so sad for me. I have a definite preoccupation with Polish poets. I wanted to host Adam Zagajewski for my series, but we had to cancel him early in the pandemic, 2020. And then he died on me, so even though I met him, and I'm happy that I got to meet him at St. John's a few years ago, I didn't get to host him. If we go up on the top of the map there, Belarus, which is run by a terrible totalitarian dictator. I've hosted, virtually anyway, Valgina Mort from Belarus, and I'm hoping to bring her back this fall with 3 poets. Good thing she's not in Belarus. She is safe here and teaching at Cornell and writing absolutely drop-dead gorgeous books of poetry. And here is her brother in poetry, a dear, dear friend, Ilya Kaminsky, who's from Odessa, Ukraine, a city that's been decimated. Good thing Ilya Kaminsky is here with us, safe, teaching at the University of San Diego. Unpictured is Macedonia, but I'm also bringing Nikola Medzirov this fall. I'm bringing 3 poets at once, and I'm going to pile them all into a van. We're going to go to gigs all over the state of Minnesota with the help of the State Arts Board. Hopefully, I'll find out about that grant. And if my editorial remark here is, I got a bad feeling about where this is going. I just, in my heart, I'm a little nervous. And if the school year goes just fine, we get to May, with the clouds remain parted, I don't think that's going to happen. My gut tells me it's not going to happen, but if we get there, I'm sure going to be glad to be wrong. And told all my students, you're already online, so you don't have to worry about it, but I told all my students this week as gently as I could that well, as joyful as I am, as cheerful as I am, as much as I'm going to stay at my post as long as I can, I got this funny feeling we're going to be locked up again because of war or some new disease or goodness knows what. We're just living in a different period of history, and it ain't regular history. I think it's, well, enough talk about the apocalypse. Let's go on to something else. You know, yesterday, I asked my Staples kids, and can't ask you because this is online. I said to them, tell me what an essay is. You've been writing them for years. You should know. And they did okay. They did better than most classes. Most classes just sit there kind of blinking. They're unable to give it a definition. Now, I've already told you, I think we're going to write 2 essays in here. And the bulk of the work is going to be with the journals. We will write 2, approximately. And there's nothing to get nervous about or worried about. And the main thing I want to tell you, I'll give you a definition, all right? And a little bit of history. The essay, which is the principal form that we write in school, was probably invented by the French. And even though I'm mad at France, I'm so mad at that country. I'm going to keep real quiet about it. Whoa, am I mad at France? They invented the essay. It was the French that realized somewhere in the 1700s, they're like, hey, why don't we create a short form of writing? This is all an essay is, you guys. An essay is created when a human being, when a man or woman says to themselves, you know what, I think I know something about something. And I'm going to sit down at this desk for a while, and I'm going to write about it. And it's not going to be long. And then I'm going to give it to someone, or publish it in a newspaper, or a gazetteer, or maybe tack it right to a church door, like maybe Wittgenstein. And that's all it is. That's all an essay is. It's a thought piece. We have a problem regarding the essay, and I'm not shaking my fist at it, but everyone in this class has been really schooled on the 5-paragraph essay. Technical stuff right now, stuff you know. You know it. An essay is supposed to have a thesis, an introductory paragraph, 3 body paragraphs, and a concluding paragraph that reiterates the whole thing and the thesis. Okay, great. It works. That's why we teach it. But it can kind of be a problem when you're at college or elsewhere in high school and you have to write a longer piece of writing, like a research paper. My main thing here, this is going to be really hard for you, not to hear but to do. I still want you to go for it. Do your very best when you do have an opportunity to write the essays. Try to achieve form without being formulaic. I'm going to repeat that. Try to achieve form, which is what we just talked about regarding arrangement, without being formulaic, without it just, really holding a sign that says, I'm an essay and I'm fulfilling all the deals. I said to those kids yesterday, okay, I'm not knocking you. Why would you, in the concluding paragraph, why would you repeat something you just told me on the page before? I got ADHD and my memory is a little bit faulty, but I can remember it, okay? Think about that. Maybe do something different with the concluding paragraph. So food for thought. And we'll get back to all this stuff next week. Now let's end with a little lyric poetry from Charlie Parr. Charlie Parr is a friend of mine. He's a roots musician. I haven't seen him in a lot of years. And it was after a year of frustratingly hosting artists virtually, sitting in my office with a videography crew outside my door, I finally got to kick off the 21-22 school year with a Verse Like Water event, and I brought Charlie Parr. I brought him up to campus. I rented a 40 by 80 foot tent. I got 200 chairs from General Rental, put the sides up on the tent. It was fantastic. It was a beautiful day. Eric Hepner, who had Student Life, he and I always worked together. He created a cookout that couldn't be beat. We had yard games, we had music, and a lot of my hipsters came back, although they were too nervous to come to the poetry reading, so the concert rather. So they sat outside the tent in lawn chairs and umbrellas and hats. Charlie Parr, I was so glad to see him. He had a very rough pandemic. I never stopped thinking in the pandemic about the different prismatic ways that people were suffering. And I'm an arts provider at CLC, so I worried about artists. And Charlie Parr had a rough time. He almost got divorced. He got divorced. He almost became homeless. He had to sell a bunch of his beautiful guitars, including the 12-string that you're about to see. And it was his first gig, right? He's a gigging musician. He needed, he was out of luck. And it felt so good to be with him again, to have him put on this beautiful concert with his new album, Last of the Better Days Ahead. And it felt really good to put a $5,000 check in his hand and get him going again. That was his first gig in the pandemic, and he was so grateful to come up from Minneapolis and play that concert. And I'm going to bring him back someday. Give this a try. Don't give it a chance. Give it a minute or two. This guy is unbelievable. He's self-taught. This is roots music. And a little bit of advice before I turn him loose. Pay attention to the small details, and also pay attention to the story. If you're not paying close enough attention to Charlie Parr, it looks like he's just a guy, an older dude, just sitting there singing about cars and trucks. It's more than that. It's a lot more than that. There's a deeper story behind each song. There's human beings suffering amidst the details regarding the cars and trucks. So just give this a try. And this is, as far as I'm concerned, this is one of the great treasures of Minnesota, Charlie Parr. You think of Prince, right, when we think of great musicians, but and I'm not knocking Prince. Let's just get this going. This Charlie Parr.
Thanks, Greg. Now the first car he had, he got from his dad. It was a '62 Dodge, but it had a throne rod. But he could pretend that it ran again, and he'd drive all around 14 miles into town. He had a Galaxy, 2 hubcaps and 3 on the tree. But in his mind it was fast. He'd mash down on the gas, and he'd pop out the clutch so that the tires would spark, and he'd drive all around 14 miles into town. Now the other kid's gone, he's left all alone. He's both old and young. He feels misunderstood, like he did when he was 15 years old. All he wanted in the world was a set of mag wheels. Mag wheels. Well, he and Beth bought a van, and they put a bed in the back, and they camp out in the pines and listen to the loons in the night, and they painted a mural on the side, but it never looked right. Still they drive all around 14 miles into town. He found someone afternoon at a garage sale in June. They were aluminum slots, but but the lugs wouldn't match up, so he had to leave them behind. And it always bothered his mind. He drove his little car to the job, and he parked it in the lot, and he never gave it much thought. I guess it didn't mean very much. From point A to point B, that was all that he needed. He never drove around, just that 14 miles into town. Now the other kids are gone, he's left all alone. He's both old and young, he feels misunderstood, like he did when he was 15 years old. All he wanted in the world was a set of mad wheels.